Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Velero community meeting and open discussion. Today is January 12th, 2021, and we got some status updates for you all. Let's start with Dave.
Yeah, the dangers of being the first one into the HackMD. So I've been working on getting the EDE tests running against Azure. Ran into some difficulties just getting things working on Azure. I'll go into those in the discussion topics. But those now work, and I'm working on getting everything to work versus all the different clouds is actually running in the clouds, getting the install running there. And then we'll start pulling it into the CI/CD pipeline.
Awesome. Any questions, comments for Dave? Any blockers this week, Dave? Anything you need help with?
Not at the moment. We'll talk about it later.
All right. Next up, Nolan.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I did not get to a lot of the PR reviews I intended to get to last week because of a family emergency. Picking up with yesterday, we did some community bug report triaging, and I reviewed this issue 3191, which folks may have seen some throttling issues in logs. Basically, there's client go logging that if client go throttles you, you can increase the I'm not even sure how to term it. It's like this weird token bucket structure that it uses. But if you get these throttling requests took over a second messages, I'm gonna tag Abby to add some documentation for this, and then we'll also increase the defaults on these values. They're just set really low, and looking around, we can set them much higher. So yeah, did some investigation on that. It looks like a fairly small fix from code. Just took a little bit to dig into that. The other big thing I did yesterday was we got an issue out. We had a few folks in the last week or so requesting support for alternatives to Restic, stuff like Borg or Duplicity. Folks have been asking about Copia. This issue is essentially an epic and a very long-term focused thing, and not anything we're gonna. It's not something we're acting on in the next 3 months necessarily, but maybe. I see Dave wagging his head, but this is just letting people know kind of the direction we're heading. We're looking at adding a data movement layer, is what we're calling it, for generic file system level data copy. And the idea would be you can swap out Restic using this layer instead of having it in the core of Velero. And the idea would be we move this this would be a part of Velero 2.0. It's not going to be a thing that we just drop in. It'll be something we get to along the way, but just letting folks know that's out there. One of the things we hope it would enable is things like taking a snapshot and then also doing file system copy off of that snapshot. So you could do things like Restic or file system level backup off of a snapshot versus one or the other. So just letting people know we're starting to plan for a 2.0 re-architecture. This is since people were kind of asking for it. We had two requests in short order. I figured we should publicize this. So if you've got comments, something you'd like to see on here, please go ahead and comment. And I think my last update was I think I'm on community support with Carlisia. We're covering for Ashish while he's on paternity leave. So don't think I have any blockers other than continuing to work through my email and PRs. I don't think I'm externally blocked right now.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments for Nolan? I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussions around the re-architecture here.
Yeah, and that'll be a larger discussion. That's only one piece of it.
Yeah. More ongoing discussions. Awesome. All right. Next up, we have Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So I was on community support last week, and that ended up taking up a bit more of my time. I think I was a bit too, I overestimated how much I would be able to get done last week. So I was planning to start on the multiple credentials support work again. I've been looking at that yesterday and today. I would like for us to come to a consensus on the approach that we're going to take, because I've been looking at like expanding or like trying to go down the paths of like the 2 or 3 different options that we had, and looking at one of them. I think there's like there's an outstanding bug in the Go plugin module that we're using from HashiCorp, which means that it might prevent us from doing one of the approaches, but it wasn't my favorite anyway. So I think that's kind of like another thing that's kind of leading me away from that approach. So I think I'd like for us just to kind of come to a consensus so that we can definitively kind of start and make some progress on this, given that we want to get it in for 1.6. And apart from that, aside from that, yeah, there were a few PRs that I reviewed that I requested changes on, and there have been updates to those. So I owe some follow-up reviews to some folks. So I will try and get on that as soon as possible.
All right. Any questions, comments for Bridget? Any blockers, Bridget? What do you need for this?
So for that, I would like maybe I'll just set up like I don't know what folks' preferences are, whether we should just set up a call just to kind of revisit where we were with it before the break. And that might just be like the easiest way just to get everyone the opportunity for us all to chat on it. So I'll do that, and that's all I really need from it. I know Carlisia's already made made a start. She put up a PR for how to set their credentials from the CLI, but we kind of need to make the decision on, once we get them from the user, where do they go from there? So that's kind of what we need to discuss. So I'll set up a call with folks and we'll go from there. But thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bridget. All right. Next up, Carlisia.
Hello. I pretty much just copy and pasted my last week's status. Last week was unproductive for me. I don't know, vacation brain. So mainly sharing support with Nolan, PR reviews, and I have some PRs that have comments that I need to address. And I'm on PTO Thursday and Friday.
Sounds good. Any questions or comments for Carlisia? Any blockers until you take some time off on Thursday and Friday?
No blockers.
All right. Then let's dive into some discussion topics. First up, we have Dave.
Yeah, so I was trying to get the end-to-end tests running on Azure. And this was my first time actually working with Azure, so everything was kind of new for me. So I was able to get like AKS up and running pretty easily. And then when I started going through the plugin install, there were just a whole bunch of different directions you could go in, and it took me a while to figure that out. And I was So one thing would be, does anybody else have experience with Azure, and what's your feeling about the current documentation on the Azure plugin? It's there's a lot, but it's also really hard to follow, in my opinion. So I was wondering if anybody else had any input on that. Yeah, I don't think anybody else is using Azure. So there is that. And then I finally got the plugin to the point where it actually ran, or it was, I had all my config set up, and then it would crash at the end, and I get a backup failed, but nothing in the backup log that indicated why it failed. And I finally looked into the pod logs, and there's an indication there that, of the error. So one thing I was considering was, we don't actually, like when we mark a backup as failed, we set that phase in the CR, but we don't actually put any info in the record of why it might have failed. And I was thinking we could add a field there in the CR and just put the failure messages, because we have the list of failure errors when we mark the backup as failed. And some of the errors can occur after we finish closing out the log. So like in this case, we couldn't persist the backup metadata into the object store. Any thoughts on whether that's a good idea, bad idea?
So I've been trying to find the issue, but I think what's happening here is there's an Azure memory chunk size for the blob store, and we're basically setting it to the maximum of 100 megabytes.
Mm.
And it's,
well, there you go.
and it's blowing out the Velero
128 meg.
Yeah, it's blowing out the Velero container thing, and we have an issue somewhere that's talking about this, and I cannot find it.
Yeah, so I'm inclined to just increase the memory limit on Velero, but that's a separate. But the other issue I had was I couldn't even get to the point where I knew that was happening.
Right.
And as a user, as a relatively stupid user, I'm going, it failed. There's no log messages.
Because
what the heck, right? And there's actually even a message that comes up that says plugin exited, but it's debug level. I'm trying to figure out where it actually gets output from. So there's some room to improve the logging. I'm going to dig into it more and just kind of dig through this case and do that. But I think we could do some things like, when we mark a backup as failed, we should really either relog at the end of the log would be okay. If we could put it into the CR, that would be handy. Just, why did you fail? Because we know.
Yeah, I think if we put it in the CR, it can't be super long.
Like we have up to 10 messages or something.
Right. 5 to 10 messages, a couple lines. Yeah. That we can capture. I think that would be okay. Originally we put the whole log in there. Quickly ran into problems.
Yes.
Once you started going outside of toys, even a small kind cluster can make that problem. But yeah, for cases like this where you can't get to the backup storage location, even that makes sense to me.
Well, I think even like general failures, the failures may not happen at the end of the log. So you see backup failed, and then you have to go and dig through the log to figure out what actually caused it to fail.
Right.
And so I'd like to have that information. Since we have that information, we know why we failed. We have the list of errors that caused us to fail. We should put it somewhere where it's easy to find.
Right. And then go ahead.
No, I just want to plus one that, and also plus one the idea of cleaning up the messages and putting it in the CR, and then also putting it in the describe.
Yes.
Yeah, if it's in the CR, describe.
How much support?
That's what I'm thinking.
And then if it's beyond 10 or something, we just like decorate it in somewhere.
We can dump them all into the log. We can put the top 10 and the first 10 into the CR, and it's like, if there's more than 10 fatal errors, you've got a really bad problem anyway.
Right. We just say, hey, look at the number versus.
Yeah, we can put in the number of fatal errors, and here's the first 10, or
and we show that and describe, decorate that in the client somehow that says, hey, we can't print them all. Something really went wrong. Go look in the logs. But for a case like this, it's super handy because we can't even have a log because we can't get the object store. So yeah, I'm not.
I'll put in a PR for that then, and I'll pull something together. Then we can see if we want to put that in. And then the end-to-end tests need to capture logs as well, which I think, Bridget, we could probably work on that together as part of the Velero debug command we were talking about, because we should be getting the same information anyway. So we run the tests, we should keep a log of all the good stuff and put it someplace. And so we should get some double duty out of the code.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and so then I want to bump up the limit on Velero overall. So the memory limit, I think 512 seemed to work, but we really need to run some bigger tests and stuff in there. But I think it'll be good if we have the end-to-end tests running. Right now, the end-to-end test is relatively small scale. We've got plans to add in some larger scale tests, and then we can just run everything through and we'll see where things start to break, and we can continue to adjust memory limits or fix memory usage as necessary.
Yeah, and the more memory and processor we give it, especially in Rustic, it's always gonna be better. We just don't want to like collapse the cluster when you back up. We don't want to say use a whole node for backup.
Yeah, I mean, if
that.
If you're having problems at the, even at the gigabyte of RAM level, it's like, maybe we should talk about your configuration.
but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a known issue. I can't find it. It may be labeled under some other issue name, and the finding was in a comment. I'll try to find it.
Yeah, I would.
The memory limit.
Yeah, I would bump up the memory quickly, because for me the Azure plugin was just DOA.
Yeah. And there were two. So Steve had suggested bumping down, doing two things: bumping up the container limit, bumping down the Azure pager chunk size, because we didn't need the chunk size to be capped. I mean, it's just fewer chunks, but if we could go like 90 megabytes instead of 100, but we can look. But yeah, I'll try to find that issue and link it.
Okay, sounds good. So that's it for me, and I'm going to be plugging away at testing more this week.
Any other comments on this? Do we have a good path forward? All right. Then let's move on to the next one. Dylan.
Hey, I was just curious. I was looking through the previous issues on Velero, and I could have sworn I'd seen something about this come up in the past, but I couldn't find it. We had a folk ask around, they essentially wanted a server configuration that would force Velero to patch the resources on the destination cluster. To me, that seemed a little scary, obviously, but they had a pretty solid use case for it, specifically around, I believe it was secrets. Now, ideally, I'm sure you'd want to do that with like a label selector or something, but has this come up in the past? I know that Velero explicitly takes the approach not to patch existing resources in the cluster, but is there an issue around it that I couldn't find? That's kind of my only question. Maybe you guys have thought about this in the past.
So, Raphael's done a lot of work on that. We've been looking at different patch mechanisms, and somebody had the question come out a little while ago, and our preferred response was, hey, why don't you write like a restore item action to do your specific thing? But restore item actions are pretty heavyweight, especially when they live outside the core code. So we've been looking at, can we make a kind of a generic one that might execute a script or something, but that's very focused on searching for and replacing / patching resources. So that's about as much as I know of what we've thought so far.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had similar, if not exactly the same, requests where folks have asked, can we like force override? Like if a resource exists, can we just like pave over it, like delete it and recreate it? So I think this is different in that you're asking to patch it to make it match instead of deleting it to make it match. Can you say more about why you need to patch it?
So, so this came from essentially a user of our product. So it wasn't exactly me, but my understanding was that there was 2 solid use cases they had. One was that they had an application that was reading secrets, and when they were essentially the secrets kind of constantly being mutated, and so they're using it as a migration tool. So they wanted to migrate whatever the data on the source side of the destination side. They didn't want to skip over the secret if it already existed. They want to continuously patch it with the newest data. That was one. And then the second was custom resources. So they had operators on the cluster they were restoring to, and there may have been some delta between the source cluster's CR definition and the destination side, and they wanted to patch those resources. So it was a little scary because if we enable this for them, like OpenShift's got a whole set of default secrets and stuff that we don't want to patch. So like enabling on a resource level seemed a little scary to us. But we kind of said, hey, maybe there's a way you can just set a flag on the Velero server, and if you want to enable this for your own use case, go for it.
Yeah, so the operator case, watching CRs, is kind of a general thing that we've been trying to figure out. We have that issue with CAPI. We have that issue with some VMware operators, that if the operator doesn't know how to handle an external program like Velero or Conveyor or whatever, writing those CRs, then the operator might do the wrong thing. So I can see why they might want to patch it. I think that might be a heavier lift than just adding a flag, because right now there's literally only one path for restore in the case of inserting to the Kubernetes API.
This is Raphael.
Unless it was a plugin, right? You couldn't really realistically control this on a per resource level. So,
right, it would basically be an all or nothing.
Yeah, that's what about to just say. I don't want to convert this as design, but maybe we can just see the idea that the plugin today restore item is very all or nothing, right? We kind of like got away with not restoring, but making a hookup to go to a Go client and do mutation of objects. My very beginning idea is have a hookup, like instead of beyond restore item, like mutator item, where you don't necessarily restore the original item, but you make an action and you return something else. In this case, it would be a patched object, or even a completely different object. But definitely something will be like another hook on the plugin level.
Well, and I think the key here is it's a completely separate API call when you're calling into Kubernetes. So if you return something you want to patch, you have to call client patch, not client.put or post. That's a little wrinkle on the mutation, because what we've been working with you on is like this CRD to this CRD, or this type to this. So that's still the same call, it's just with a different kind.
Yeah.
But here we'd be saying, hey, it's the same thing, but a different call.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which, I mean, I think I can see use cases for it, but it is bigger than I'm prepared to weigh in on this meeting.
So
I was thinking.
Yes, one thing I was thinking is that some of this sounds like a post-execution hook type thing, but I think the issue right now with the post hooks is they don't get access to all the backup internals, right? We run a script, and I don't believe they have any ability to like find out what else was in the backup and like run through it and
Exactly.
find things.
That's true. Yeah.
So bringing that up a level or bringing that in, where like the post hook, where we have like a post hook plugin that actually gets the whole backup structure, and it could go and look for things. And it can, you can do anything you like from that level, and it starts to get a little crazy. I mean, you can turn complete in there, but might be something to think about.
Yeah, other than having those post hooks like go download the backup resource list, which is possible, because that is part of backup describe dash details. But that's that's hacky. But it's also that doesn't give them stuff like, did it actually try to restore and fail, because it's already there, which is what you would want to do in a patching scenario right now.
So if I were to open an issue around this, I think like the concrete example that I was given around the secrets that I think makes the most applicable sense would be like a credential secret. So let's say a secret contains credentials to a database, and that secret gets corrupted. So someone overwrites it by accident, and then they want to run a restore to get the secret back into its original spot, and then make sure all the other application specific stuff is up. This would be like on a per restore basis, essentially, for their use case. Like, do you see that as applicable enough to at least open an issue? I don't know if it makes sense to even work this thing, but
so that almost sounds like we're looking to get down to the level where we can say, hey, I want to pull this specific resource out of the backup and slam it back in, because I don't think we have that ability at the moment.
Not unless you give it a unique label.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad idea. It's kind of like file level restore from a regular backup, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think what the requirement is, I don't want to delete my object tree in order to be able to restore it from the backup. I want to just patch it.
Right. There are issues along those lines, but I don't think anyone's ever said the word patch. Which
update, like yeah, update it, yeah.
Yeah, I
it's
think that
like a merge of like it's like.
Yeah, I think that's the key difference to me. A lot of people have wanted the behavior of where we delete all objects and then restore all objects to force it to match the backup. I'm more comfortable with a patch.
Yeah, I agree.
Though I don't think we can patch everything, because like patching a PV isn't logical. So because especially because those are not mutatable. So there may be external constraints put on us here, but for secrets that makes sense.
Yes, like the file system restore idea, or the individual file restore, right? Like you don't get the ability to say actually merge these files, right? Like
right,
which is what patch would do. Like patch actually merges to the existing thing with the backed up thing. In some ways, you almost want to say either take the newly backed up thing or keep the old thing for a given file, not and like overwrite it rather than like merging them together. So the patching idea, like, isn't there way more edge cases with patching that would lead us into problems than actually just giving somebody the ability to state for a given set of resources, the ability to actually like roll them back in some ways?
Yeah, unless you're specifying the exact fields to patch.
Right. which is a whole other set of problems probably.
So,
that UX probably gets really fun to make in a CR.
Because with the secret, like I'd imagine the main thing you're going to want to patch over is the data field. I guess I could see an argument for wanting to overwrite the labels and stuff, but like Velero already clears some of that data on restore to let the running cluster win, so that the backup cluster isn't trying to jam in irrelevant data. But yeah, that does raise an interesting point.
So what I'm thinking is that our restore command is kind of a gross level thing. And it's one of those things where there's like a whole bunch of flags to, where you start having all these flags to do this and do that. And then you apply that to a running system. And that's just like, take blade, apply to fingers, right? Because this is really something where you probably want to have a lot of user interaction and control. So I'm thinking one thing we might provide is a way to extract individual resources or all the resources as YAMLs out of the backup. And then, the user can pick and choose and apply them using kubectl. Because like this case, like I want to apply credentials. Applying like a gross level thing of like, oh, let's overwrite credentials. It's like, that's really scary to me. What do you think?
Well, more or less, people can do that, right? You can untar the Velero backup and cherry pick the JSON and apply it. You can get away with this, but the question is how to do this in an API manner. And then I still think creating a new hook maybe can get away with all these unique cases put in this basket, this new hook, where you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can, instead of restore yes or no, you can patch it, you can mutate, you can read again and make another action. But this is pretty much open up for you to have a Go client and do this manipulation.
That actually have another alternative, and just trying to summarize the problem we are solving here is that we don't want all or nothing. We want an ability to say pick and choose between clients. So in some ways we want extensibility of the system. So can we do it on the restore item plugin? Instead of just returning an item, it will also return an action along with it. So in the action, you say patch or replace or whatever other action items we could think of. And then Velero would actually, instead of creating the resource, use that action item to merge specific fields of the resource, right? Because as people were already discussing, we want the ability to pick and choose select fields in the resources. So maybe the plugin writers can actually make sense of what fields make sense for that resource, for that plugin, and then have that ability for Velero to actually use patch on those select fields.
So I guess what we're saying then would be if customer X wanted to do this with this given set of resources, they would write a plugin that would say patch this set of resources. And they would just use that plugin when running Velero.
Yes, yeah. So I think what this would do is take the granularity at a resource level, like at a collection of resource level, rather than one resource, right? And give them the give users ability for a set of collection rather than just one, and still have that extensibility. which to me seems like a good granularity level to start with.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I think I'm pretty good understanding of the good reasons for the plugin approach. So just wanted to see if this was something else anyone brought up. So thanks.
Yeah, I think I do like that approach, with the caveat that it since it's a new return, it's an additional return field, it may break additional or existing restore item actions. So I'm not opposed to it. We just need to handle backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
That seems like a good middle ground to me, but I wouldn't say no to a design document on this to allow that functionality.
I think we could do it with reasonable defaults, like we did it with Scott's design.pr. So yeah, right. I can work with Dylan on making sure we have that right defaults to not break backward compatibility.
Thanks.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. Next up, we have Fong.
Yeah, so I think we talked about this long time ago, but I dropped the ball because I got stuck into other issues at work. Basically, we want to enhance the Velero plugin to handle timeout. So I have a feedback from the previous design proposal and about having passing the timeout to the executor implementer of the plugin so that it can time out and clean up accordingly. So I did some research and I found that currently we already put the context as a parameter from the client, our gRPC client into the gRPC server. But on the gRPC server side, that context object is not being used at all. So I want to enhance the code so that we on the implementer can receive that context object, and in Nolan the context object can also contain the timeout deadline, so we can enhance that. But that comes with a bunch of issues associated with this. For example, like if the implementer do not implement that timeout, and what should we do, and so on and so forth. So I want to invite, I invite people here to come to this meeting and we can talk in detail. I post my email there. So if anyone who wants to be invited in the meeting, please email me. I will invite. And I also have a Zoom link there. It will be this Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So we can talk in detail there. I don't want to hog the time here. After we come up with some kind of a solid design, I will bring back to this community and present it to the community, and we will talk more about at that point. That's it for me.
So just a question, would this plugin be focused on Dell technologies, or should anyone who's interested in writing plugins join in?
I think the design that I intention to see for any plugin, you need to, because I think that originally my focus is only for myself, for my company, right? I'm interested only in the backup. But the way I look at this is that if we enhance the Velero plugin timeout, it should be applicable to anyone, right? To anyone who have any needs to work with the timeout, because I also see that the restore also might have some timeout, or maybe the snapshot. There's a volume snapshot plugin also. I don't know if anyone interested in it yet, but I think I anticipate that people might be interested. So why don't we just make this available to all the plugin types? And then it's up to the implementer whether they decide to implement that function or not, right? We might have to make sure that it is backward compatible, to make sure that it still works even though the implementer doesn't want to implement that. So that's kind of a thing.
Could you send out an invite to the Project Velero mailing list so people have this on their calendar? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I think I can, but I don't think I have that alias. Could someone give me that alias so I can send the invite to? Yeah.
I'll send it over.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you so much for this. Next up, we have Carlisia.
I just wanted to let everybody know we had a little snag with using the GitHub discussion for support, because they turned off, they had a bug and they had to turn off the transferring of issues to discussion topics. And so I don't think we should make a fuss about it or announce that we are using that until that is resolved. They're working on it though, but I don't know when that's going to be in effect, like whatever fix they have to put in.
It seems like we could use it, just not take, we just can't move issues over, right?
Yes, we can definitely use it. We can definitely, if people can definitely add Q&A questions, and we can answer there for sure. I think I was thinking it would be more efficient if we wait to announce and let everybody know that we're doing this until this is fixed, and we can, move forward, moving tickets there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And HackMD has been slow for me.
I thought it was just me, so I was glad to hear it someone else. Well, not glad that you're experiencing it, yep, but glad that it's not just me.
And what we do is we archive it, right, Jonas?
Yep. So I can archive this and kind of start anew here for the new year. So I'll archive everything from 2020 and keep the 2021 notes here.
Cool. Thank you.
Will do. All right. Nolan.
Yeah, so I was asked to give a quick status check on 1.6, and I think we should integrate this going forward into the community meetings to help hold our team accountable. We are moving forward with the testing. Where we really need to pick it up is with getting the multiple credential provider or multiple credentials design approved. That's kind of our big ticket thing aside from tech debt. The various other things in the list are ordered by priority from top to bottom. And that stuff needs to maybe cut in order to work for time. Some of it could go into a point release. Folks are certainly welcome to grab some items off of this backlog. We do have some teams here at VMware that are going to be helping. I'm going to have a more prepared review of this board next week, but I'm going to integrate going over this release each week in the community meeting. But yeah, this is definitely something we need to be taking a look at more regularly and letting people know where we are. So the big ticket items we have in motion right now are the end-to-end testing and the credentials.
Sounds good. Any comments on this? All right. Bridget.
This was just a follow-up, just because I noticed Nolan's point about the 1.6 release. There were a few pull requests that had been merged recently, and there were a few bugs related to that, which we knew we wanted to get in for 1.5.3, and some folks have been asking about them, so I was wondering if we could take that on. I don't know if there's anything specific that's blocking us from doing this, or whether that's, I'm happy to kind of just take this on and try and get a release out. I also wanted to follow up. It's one of the PR is one of the contributor shout outs below, but I just wanted to ask as well about patch releases for plugins. Do we tend to just like group those together with main Velero releases, or do we also do kind of like out of step plugin releases as well?
So to answer the questions about 1.5.3, my intention was to get that out last week or this week. The main blocker there is pretty much all the stuff that I wanted to put in there is closed, so I need to go back and review exactly what items to put in there. But like I mentioned, your PR with properly deleting when I think it was delete item actions are missing. I know that's hitting the vSphere plugin team. And then Raphael wanted a fix for include/exclude plugins. And there's some others that we need to get included. And I don't know what all of them are. Okay. To answer the plugin release, generally we've been grouping them together, but there's no reason, like if there is a fatal flaw in one of them, there's no reason why we couldn't release a plugin out of step. Yeah, cool. Yeah, just because the first one on the contributor shout out seems like a pretty it's not something that I'd seen reported before, but now that it has been reported and found, it seems like it could potentially impact a lot of people quite seriously. So okay. Yeah, if we want to get that one out before 1.5.3, that's totally fine. Okay, cool.
All right. Any other comments on this? Any other discussion topics anyone want to bring up? All right, let's dive into the contributor shoutouts. Yeah, this one you'll have to open. I have not had a chance to look at these. Was this the one you were talking about?
Yes. Yeah, and I'm happy to speak to this one. So this was an issue that was reported by someone, Bryson Shepherd and Justin Walker on Slack. They encountered an issue where sometimes their backup, they had a number of schedules set up, and sometimes the backup custom resources were not appearing, even though the backups were being performed, and they weren't showing whenever they were listing the backups using the Velero CLI. And what was happening behind the scenes was the Azure plugin can return up to 5,000 blobs in a GET request, but it might not always return them, and you're supposed to paginate through the results. And the Azure plugin was not paginated through the results, which meant that the backup sync controller thought that there were some items that were missing, and as a result was deleting the associated custom resources in the cluster. So the backups were still existing in storage, but Velero thought that they didn't exist anymore. So that was why this was a pretty serious issue for them. I mean, like, there was no loss of data, but it was just it impacted the experience. So Justin Walker and Bryson, they debugged this, and Justin submitted a PR. So that's one that I think would be a really good candidate for a patch release for the Azure plugin.
Awesome. And the next one?
Looks like this is on the Helm chart. This was pulling in a feature that we added to Velero that will be in 1.6, where if you annotate a schedule, those annotations will now propagate down to the backup. So this change to the Helm chart allows you to put annotations in schedules with the chart and have that same capability. Looks like this is only on main if you're using main through the Helm chart, but otherwise this will be in 1.6 for Velero itself.
All right, fantastic. Does anyone have anything else they want to bring up on today's meeting? Okay, then we're going to close it out. Thank you everyone for joining in today. Thank you all for the fantastic discussions. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.